Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Life in Sport. My name is Evanne Ní Chuilinn, and I've been working in sports broadcasting in Ireland for the past 17 years. So over this series of interviews, I would like to shine a light on some of the most rewarding jobs in Ireland, which I believe are in the sports industry. This is episode 1, and I'm delighted to be joined by Vinny Hammond, who is Head of Analytics and Innovation at the IRFU. Vinny, you're very welcome. Thank you. And you're my first guest.
I know, yeah. So I'm the crash test dummy. So yeah, we'll see how we go.
I am delighted. I'm delighted because these jobs in data analysis are very new. I don't know a whole pile about them or how you get into them. And I know a lot of people will probably feel the same way. But before we get into that, just your own background. Were you always involved in sport? Did you have a passion for it? And did you always know you were destined to work in the industry?
I think, yeah, growing up, obviously you'd be I would be into everything, golf, football, cricket, hurling, whatever was going. But yeah, you do get that as you get closer to kind of the end of your school days. You kind of think, right, how am I going to turn this into a career? Because they're not going to be a professional player, so I need to figure out how we're going to make a livelihood out of it. So yeah, so I went and did a sports management degree in UCD, and then from there did a master's in performance analysis in Cardiff, and then now I'm back in UCD for the last 6 or 7 years doing a PhD there. So
Brilliant.
Completion date heading towards 2040 something, I'd say at this stage.
Oh yeah,
but,
yeah.
I have an amazing supervisor there, Dr. Denise McGrath, and she's keeping me on the straight and narrow. So hopefully in the next year.
That's really interesting that you're still learning. I love that. I went back and did a master's, and actually you were a guest lecturer on it. It was the postgrad, so it was the master's version of your undergrad that I did, the sports management.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And there was actually a good bit of rugby in that, good bit of golf as well, and then a good bit of governance and stuff. And the governance stuff was really what I focused on. But if we go backwards a little bit, obviously, yeah, we can't all be professional sports athletes or funded athletes or Olympians, but you went and did your sports masters. But if you go backwards into school, because you ended up doing analytics, were you always good at numbers?
No, and you know what? I wasn't actually good at maths. I didn't do chemistry. I didn't do physics. I didn't do applied maths.
Wow, I'm actually shocked because I assumed I'm really bad at maths. I'm really good at languages, but I'm really bad at numbers. I'm afraid of them.
Yeah.
So I kind of assumed that, you'd need to be really good.
No, I think it's, it's a lot of it is the way it's taught as well. I think if I was writing let's say a leaving cert curriculum now I think you can study like Greek or Latin, but I don't know, like statistics and data analytics and stuff, you could literally walk out of school at 18. And like if I'd studied anything for the amount of time I studied, say, Irish in school, I'd be a genius at it. So
yeah.
I think it's probably something that's growing, but people do need to separate the idea of maths and data analytics and statistics. And I know the two are the same, but they're also quite different in that maybe in school somebody asks you a question in a Leaving Cert maths paper, and you go and you do 12 lines of an equation, you get to the bottom and x equals 6 or whatever it is. Like you press 2 buttons on a calculator, or in Excel it's one formula and that's done. So actually I think that the fun bit for me is what you do with that, and how you know which test to do as opposed to how to do the tests. And that makes it exciting. It can be insanely boring looking at equations, but when you look at, like, say, something that would excite me, that you can predict a simple thing like a kid's height can be predicted from their 4 to 5 years old, or body weights or anything like that. And
No
even
way. That's mad.
The amazing stuff at the moment is that, like, the whole pandemic has been run in the background by data scientists in terms of the decisions, and whether you agree with them or not is another thing. But every single data scientist at the moment is playing around with the same data sets and coming up with different ways of dealing with a worldwide emergency.
The numbers don't lie.
No, and they don't. And that's it. In sport, I think it comes back to you have the art of kind of coaching and objective and subjective feedback against each other, but you don't want to take away from the fact of, like, the gut feel and the amazing kind of, like the the human side of things, but I think it just makes up part of the conversation that we don't ignore it.
So when did you realize then, because it is quite a new area, probably like, the last decade or so in professional sport. So when did you figure out, okay, there's a career to be made in data analysis?
I think it was probably so that my master's was performance analysis, and we didn't actually, even then we didn't have a massive focus on data analytics, right? Because the availability of data, it's still not huge in say in rugby and football. At the time it wasn't big either. And then you had all these companies like, say, Opta producing, reams and reams of data, and everybody all of a sudden had access to it. But the issue was that everyone had access to it, nobody knew what to do with it. So it goes back to like the kids studying maths in school. Like if you give a bunch of 16 or 17-year-olds a whole load of data on, I don't know, the Wimbledon final, the World Cup final, Six Nations game at the weekend for us against France, like that's going to be exciting for them to go, oh, I can solve a problem here. I can, so yeah, I think that's where it starts, and coming up with something that's actually useful as opposed to just hammering out something that's kind of doing your job.
Do you think a lot of jobs in sport like that, and yours is a good example of it, is there a lot of learning on the job as opposed to in the classroom?
Yeah, massively. And week on week as well. Like there's always something new that I'm looking at going, I look at a blog or somebody like I don't know, 18-year-old kid has written an algorithm to predict such and such. And I'm looking at it going, wow, like that is a really cool piece of work. And I have no idea how he did it or she did it. And there's no backup for me. I'm like, oh, I need to figure this out. So like you reach out to people online and ask people how did they do things, and yeah, some of the best people I've met or connected with have been like through just like, do you mind me asking you a question, and how you did something, and swallowing your pride a little bit and think, there's no way you know everything.
Yeah, and like, so does that mean that a lot of this is happening outside of a conventional kind of college degree or university course? Or what are the options if you do want to have, like, I always think that even if it's just because you want to back yourself and you don't want to have imposter syndrome, I always think it's good to have a qualification, because you're qualified for the job, you feel like you've got confidence going for the job. But in terms of options, if you do want to pursue a career like this, is it like that? Is it, is it a sports science type degree, or is it like, do you have to focus more on the analytics or the performance?
Yeah, it's so varied, right? So in Europe, I think you probably see, and Australia probably the same. A lot of people would go in through the route of a sports science degree or a sports type of degree, whereas in America they go in as a data science, computer programming. They come in from that side of it, and that's the difference at the moment with say North American sport and say football, rugby, is that they're far more advanced in terms, or not that they're more advanced, they're more, the industry's progressed quicker over there in that side of it, but potentially slower in the side of it of making sense to a coach. And I think those two are separating at a really, really dangerous speed at the moment, in that you're getting these incredible scientists coming out with amazing work, but actually the translation back to the guy who's coaching the team is like, well, actually, you look at what the scientists produce, and the coach is like, well, what do you want me to do with that? Like, it looks great, but so yeah, so it's constantly evolving, constantly changing.
So what about your role then with the IRFU? Because everybody will be used to seeing you on television because you sit beside the head coaches, and you're always
yeah.
You're always deep in thought, and obviously what you're doing is you're trying to collate as much information as you can for a head coach, either at halftime or full time, because it's all about analysis and looking back on what has happened. So talk us through what you do during a match, for example.
I think during a game it's real clarity. There's 4 or 5 coaches in a coach's box that have all got their own game plans in their heads. They've all got their own biases, which they you can't fight. Certain things that you really, really want to see or that you're going to be focused on. Big moments in games as well will trigger the coaches trigger a coach's kind of attention very quickly to that moment. Say if you're a line out coach and we've just lost a line out. And I think my job, and anyone who works in as a performance analyst with a team, is to try and keep some kind of a level head and give some objective feedback as and when it's needed. And there's probably a little bit of a science and an art to it, because the art is not to deliver it at the wrong time, and the science is to deliver the right stuff. So
are you delivering little pieces of information during a game? Are you saying, like, during a game, are you like whispering in Andy Farrell's ear going, right, we've lost the last 5 lineouts, and the reason we've lost, like, what like, is it constant during a match, or is it half time?
No, I think it's during the game, so that we're not like we're not getting to the 35th minute and then all of a sudden you're showing a report and it's like, oh my god, what is this? But it's always, you know, specific to the game that we're playing potentially. So if you think of in a rugby sense, if there's a fullback and 2 wingers, like as simple as if the left-footed winger has started to shifts over to the right, as sometimes happens, and if the fullback is playing particularly deep or whatever it is, that the coaching staff are focused on a lot of the on the ball actions. So I think as analysts, you do have the space to detach a little bit and look at the stuff that maybe isn't as obvious, and then in the breaks in play deliver some kind of a message if you need to deliver a message, and knowing when to shut up if you need to shut up. So are you collating that information through the little gimmicks they wear in their jerseys? Is that, and no, you're looking at all of that, or what's the story? That's the GPS. So the GPS stuff is coming in live as well to a separate kind of a stream, and then we look at the event data during a game. So like the stuff that we would call event data, like tackles, carries, passes, that kind of thing, but also then stuff based around the game plan that we would go into the game with. So did we plan on kicking, and how that plan is beginning to execute or isn't, and that. But who's generating that information though? Like, is there a computer program? So we would pay a third party provider. There's not many, so we would pay a subscription to a third party provider to provide us that information. And then we would also have I work in a team of 3 or 4 analysts on match day, who have all got separate kind of roles. If you ever look on the sideline, there's always an analyst on the touchline, and that's very much qualitative feedback. So there's no numbers coming in there, it's vision. So he will be working with the scrum coach on the touchline to look at, any kind of, if a player's coming off the bench, what do they need to know? What do they need to see? And then in the coach's box, so there's myself and Alan Walsh, John Buckley's on the touchline, and Adam Foy, Jack Hannon, 2 other guys working in the background then. So it's a real, there's a whole lot of stuff coming in, and the challenge is actually to get rid of the bits that we don't need and leave ourselves with some clarity. That's all you're chasing the whole time. Well, that's all I would consider that I chase the whole time. And you mentioned having a level head. So I assume you've got all these balls in the air, you've got all this information coming in, and you need to sift through it and find the most significant pieces of information to pass on to potentially a hot-headed coach who is under pressure, or no, any coach though, any coach who is in charge of a high-performance environment. And you've worked under a number of coaches, so I'm not speaking about anybody in particular, but you are there to do a certain job. So how important is that level head then? Yeah, it's everything for me. I think it's like I always say to the lads, when there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong on match day, right? So like feeds and cables and wire, I'm sure from broadcast, is that one cable can take down a whole broadcast. Yeah. And so I think when I'm always saying this to the lads is like, when something just goes wrong, just chill. Don't make a snap decision on it. And actually the crew that we have at the moment are very, very good at that, at not making a kind of a, plug everything out and start again moment. But pretend you're on air. That's what you should do. Pretend you're on air. You can't lose it. You can't lose it on air. So we always have these big ones, like Scotland this year. That we were trialing we were trying something. We were really pushing something that we were really hopeful would work. And myself and John were in the coach's box, and it's about 20 minutes to kick off. And we'd ran this system for maybe an hour and a half constantly. We'd been going back and forth, checking perfect. And just literally teams come in off the warm up and the whole like 8 screens blank.
You have 8 screens in front of you.
Well, like there's 8 screens that would all give you so each of the coaches have their own laptop, and then we have some consistency feeds off to the left. Everything was black, right? Everything was just gone. And it was 15 minutes to kick off, and like that's an adrenaline rush.
Go on, who lost it? Go on.
No, it was good. It was good because you know, Johnny stepped up at the time, and he was just like, right. I just kept saying to him, I said, just don't do anything for a second. Think about this. And we just replugged in a couple of bits and
switch it off and switch it back on again. It always
works. Yeah. But no, that's actually the excitement. And you know, people who think that they don't potentially want to work in sport, but they like that side of things. They like, you know,
high performance environment.
Yeah. Even from a production point of view, video analysis in America. So like I have some colleagues that work in basketball in the NBA, and they have a video coordinator, right? So that's like a different role to their head of data science, which is different role from their performance analyst. The video coordinator is a person who's pulling in you know, all of those feeds to make the feeds perfect and the quality, and it's 4K and it's zoomable and it's replayable, all this. But the rest of the stuff is like, then they move into another person does the analytics, another person does the game plan, another person does the scout. Whereas I think at the moment we're trying to kind of cover it all. Yeah.
And are you talking about that's for a particular franchise? Like that's not for a broadcaster?
No, that's just for the team. That's
unbelievable.
One of the
that's unbelievable.
Teams,
yeah, that's unbelievable. Yeah. Like in terms of
I think they have
resources.
They have a staff of about, I don't know, maybe 18 with a team, which is scouting, analytics, video production, post-production.
I'd actually love to do an internship with an NFL franchise. That would be so cool.
Yeah.
Because all of that is fascinating.
I don't know, would they drive you nuts though? Like I look at some of the preseason stuff and you're like, oh my God, would this fella not just...
Maybe it's overkill.
Does he not? Yeah. Does he not see how ridiculous he's being in this scenario? But yeah, no, definitely. And some of the coaches as well would strike you as really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Can you think of a moment where something, you know, a piece of information that you fed a head coach influenced a game, changed a game? Or does it happen every single game? Is that your job?
No. I think what you've got to do is like, you know, in a coach's box of whatever amount, five coaches with, say, on average 10, 15 years coaching experience at the top level. That's a lot of years of coaching in there. So you're really not trying to influence the game. You might just try and influence small parts of their processes. And like, there's a lot going on and they have a lot going on, but realistically it's the, you know, the 1%ers that you try and, there wouldn't be a moment. Like I could tell you a lot of things I got wrong. Like we did even earlier in my career, I was doing under 18s team, and we had this plan on the restart to kick to their best ball carrier so that we make an example of him. And you know, the first restart we kick up, absolutely drill him, and then so that this I was like, yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah. And anyway, first restart, ball in the air. He catches it perfect. I was like, all right, we have a clean shot on him. Anyway, he goes through 4 players. He's hands off and he's like, we're back on our own line. He's basically gone 65, 70 meters. And I'm in the coach's box. And I was like young at the time, young in the job. And I was like, oh, Jesus, how am I going to get out of this? So, but sometimes you just got to laugh. And
yeah, they don't all come off. They do not all come off.
Laugh and move on. No.
So in a week then where there's a Six Nations, or like during a Six Nations championship where, you know, it's a block of 6 or 7 weeks, or even bigger again, a World Cup where you're gone. I remember meeting you in the airport, I think it was before the last World Cup, and you were heading off for a couple of months or whatever.
As long as we were heading off, we weren't coming home.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that one. So like people mightn't realize that, you know, the players are gone, the coaches are gone, the whole staff is pretty much, you're all together that whole time, right?
Yeah.
So in a week then, what's your week look like when you're in camp like that? You know, so post a match, pre a match, during the week, do you have much contact with individual players, or are you mostly working with coaches?
I think it's both. And you know what, it grows as well. The more, you know, like some of the players we work with since, I don't know, some of them are 17 or 18 years old. So it is a really nice environment when we come back in and you see people who you haven't seen in 3-6 months, depending on the gaps, or especially if there's a player being out long-term injury, and it's a great buzz to see somebody coming back into environment after being out for so long. And even staff too, like we disconnect at the end of, say, the Six Nations, and we don't see each other until we come together for a summer tour. But you do have a second family in that sense, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing, because you've got, a lot of people with kids and stuff, if they've got to go away, it's tough. Like, at 7, I'm lucky I didn't have kids, or I don't have kids, but like going away for an 8-week World Cup is a different prospect if you've got kids at home. And so it's a support network too, I think, that we all have with each other. But it's quite tight too. In the Irish group at the moment, in the Irish management group, is a settled settled backroom team, and it's nice.
So Carton House then, say for a Six Nations championship, do you base yourselves there, or do you just meet up?
Yeah, no, we just well, for this one it was like lock in, so like you're in your room.
How bad? Your room in Carton House?
Yeah, I know, it sounds great, but in fairness, actually Carton House this time was just unbelievably good. Like, although it sounds like you're being locked up, they were so good with us. Even like they put in a new coffee machine. It sounds so small, but like,
oh no, these things are very important.
Little things that they did for us, that was like makes it amazing, and you don't feel as detached. But no, week to week, we come in there on a Sunday night, and in that sense, we came in a Sunday night, and we were there until the end of the Six Nations. Just travelled into town for the games, for 2 nights. Travelled away, charter flight in and out. Nobody on the plane, nobody on the airport at the other end. It was quite bizarre, actually, but it was interesting. It was
you were very lucky to have been able to operate so normally, because nobody else is able to do that.
Absolutely.
So do you have so in terms of, like, I'm just trying to get a sense of what your week looks like in a camp week then. So do you have particular days with meetings? You start with coffee, and then you get your delivery of your snacks to the door.
Yeah, snacks to the door, coffee again.
And then meetings?
Yeah, so like a normal Monday for us would normally be like a review day and a preview day. So we come in on the Sunday night, but Monday will be low in terms of load. So like a walk through, and as the players are walking through, we would have videos or video like as it's happening, so that we can go back and fix things on the fly. So the cameras are connected to the screens at the side of the pitch. So if somebody's gone in the wrong place, that we can correct it on the go, which has been a really good.
During a training session, like.
Yeah. Okay. And it's good, because on those Mondays with it, where the load is kind of low and the speed of the session is low, that we can kind of fix things on a Monday as opposed to be fixing them on a Thursday or a Friday in a captain's run. All the previews and the data collection side of things is done by then. That would be, we're on the other side of it by then, so that we should be into just rugby mode at that stage.
Okay. I always like to ask people who work in sport if there are any occupational hazards. Now, you touched on, obviously, having to go away a lot, and it's antisocial at times. And, that's always the irony with everybody that works in sport. When you're working, most people are off, because it's an enjoyable type of, you're working in a really social environment. Most people go to the pub to watch the matches, but you're at them. So is there anything, that you not dislike about the job, but that is, a bit of an occupational hazard?
I think you can get emotionally invested in it, and your whole 3 or 6 month run into, say, a World Cup or Six Nations, you can watch that crushing in 60 seconds, at the start of, say, the Argentina quarterfinal or the New Zealand quarterfinal in Japan. And that does take a toll on you mentally, where you're going like, this is something that everybody in the group really wanted to go well, and it doesn't. And that's just life, isn't it? Like, it doesn't, it's not, it's not rosy all the time. But yeah, those moments are, you do feel like the weight of, or you certainly, when you've got crowds, people have traveled out to Japan, and you think, oh my God, like, you do feel part of that. You feel part of the performance a little bit in the sense of we failed, and that kind of let down.
It sounds like your occupational hazard. It sounds like your occupational hazard is the same as any sports fan's hazard. When you follow a team, when you love a sport, it's not the worst one, in terms of occupational hazards.
No, the other one is the food, right? So the food is so good.
Oh, I hear you. Yes.
And but you see, so the players are eating 6 times a day, 7 times a day, but they're also training twice a day. So like, I would come back in after training, and there's like beef skewers or whatever it is, right? So I'm like, oh yeah, I need a snack now, so I'll have a beef skewer. But like
Nice.
then 90 minutes later, I'm having like chicken dinner or whatever it is, and then like 2 hours after that, another snack will arrive, like prawn skewers or something, and then I'm like having. But I'm not
Oh,
trained,
I'm
so
not sure I could cope with that temptation. That's really
no,
tricky.
oh no, I
Yeah.
don't, and most of us don't.
Mm.
We'd always talk about like getting the camp kilo, like is the initial like one day in camp, and you've already, because nobody eats like 8 meals a day, but all of a
No.
sudden, because food is so important to the athletes.
Can't believe you didn't say this was this as your first occupational hazard. Like that's
No,
serious.
no, no. So like, yeah. So
I thought you were
that's
going to say the food can be really bad because, like, I don't
no,
know
it's
if I ate
insane.
from
It's
one end of the
insane.
day. I don't know if I ate from one end of the day to the next at the Rio Olympics. The food was so bad, and we had no time.
Really,
We had no time to get it, and any time, like, there was no food for media, so you had to queue at the normal stalls, and there was like a mile long queue, so you didn't have
they
time.
didn't have. You didn't have
Like,
like a VIP badge. So this is the
it
issue.
didn't work. Oh no, Rio was just They didn't work. No, 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 they did not work. So we were like, we would come home after a 16-hour day and get a steak every night just because we were so hungry.
Really,
Yes, and
yeah.
that's not good for you either. You're going to bed on a steak, like
No, but if you're
mental.
hanging around with other fit people, right? So all these athletes walking around you, and you're like, oh yeah, we've just been at training, so I'm gonna have a snack again. And like, there's like protein bars and stuff, and I have a protein bar with a coffee, and then I'm thinking, what am I doing?
What am I lifting for
I
this? I
haven't
haven't.
touched a
Yeah.
thing all day. So
Oh
yeah,
God, that's
that is
fascinating.
definitely
That's
occupational hazard for
that's pretty
sure.
funny. That's pretty funny. Can I ask you about, because it's interesting, I this series of discussions that I want to have with people, obviously it's going to be 50-50 because I know so many men and women working in the industry. But I don't know many data analysts who are women. Is that a gap?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something that maybe traditionally the STEM subjects have been male dominated in if you look at a balance of it. I think it's something that probably needs to change in terms of, there's enough space and there's enough work for people to actually see a career path in it and not go, oh, that's a job for men. And I'd be quite kind of, I don't know how you best describe it, but I look at, say, my mum works in St Mary's Rugby Club, and she's worked in sport a lot of her life, and I don't see I see her as a good example of somebody who's just like, I don't see her as a woman working in sport. It's just that she just works in sport, like that's what she
Mm.
does. And I think that's probably the thing that needs to change the most. Like I didn't see, I would see, say, in my mind anyway, if someone said name Ireland's greatest boxer, I would say Katie Taylor. I wouldn't say Katie Taylor's Ireland's best female boxer. And then in the same sense, you don't come back from a conference and say, oh, there was a great female data scientist that presented.
Mm.
And I think that's probably the thing that we maybe need to think about a
But
little bit more.
why do we need to think about it? Why do we need it to change? How
Well,
important is it to have women in the room?
yeah, absolutely. It's everything, because it's also, to normalize it, that we don't need to have to say, oh, there's a female data analyst. It's just a data analyst, or there's a female physio. It's just a physio. And I think that's the important one. Like, Rachel Blackmore is a perfect example. She's just like a champion jockey. Like she's not a champion female jockey. So, like the best, or one of the big CEOs in the data analytics world in NHL in hockey, Megan Chayka, she's done an unbelievable job at building this whole stat leads as a brand, and also as a data collection for NHL hockey. But it's actually just the company's really good, and what they do is good. The output's good. It's not that because there's a female CEO. It's because they have a
Mm.
good CEO.
Mm.
And in the same sense, then yeah, if there's somebody that's good enough in our world in data science or data analysis, and then they should.
Are there many women working in kind of the high performance environment with the IRFU?
I think it's growing. I think it's year on year it's growing, but I think it's probably somewhere where, I know, say for example, in the performance analysis world, the balance isn't right at the moment. It's beginning to shift. I know from when I was studying, there was a Kate Burke who looks after all the pathway analysis in the IRFU. And she's been there for maybe 10 years now, 11 years. And she would be absolutely central to how they do things, and the kind of their pathway of players. So even the players in that sense would see her as the person they go to when they need something, looked at statistically or visually. And I think that's properly, that's the way it is, and that it's not that she's seen as something, like that there's like a quota or anything like that.
I know what you're getting at. I think what you're saying is basically that we need to see, we need male players to see that the females are the experts too, and we don't see enough of that. So then that regenerates, the I suppose the opinion that they're not the experts or whatever. And like I would have come up against that as well years ago.
Same thing. And again, like if you say, okay, talk to me, a good sports reporter, like hopefully we don't have to say, oh, this one's a good female one and this one's a good male one, and there's in Leinster there's like Juliet who's she's a performance analyst there. I think she's just signed on another year or two. Sometimes you see her in the coach's box, and that's hopefully the start of some really good shift towards, not like to get 50-50 is ideal, but realistically sometimes you go, okay, well if the balance coming out of the university isn't 50-50, well then it's hard to get to that point. But certainly, and look at other sports that they've progressed really quickly in pushing that number up higher than it is. Yeah,
it's going back to what you started with, which is, the STEM subjects and, taking an interest in them, because, even if you don't have to have this insane aptitude for numbers, you still need to, study data at some point. So if you're not going into those college courses, then you're not coming out of them. Correct. Would you have any advice for either young people or old people like me who maybe would like to transition? I have no interest in taking your job, by the way, but people who are
please, like we'll swap.
It's a relatively new area, so you do have people who are really good at data analysis but don't work in sport. So do you have any advice for people who maybe want to jump into that at a later stage in their life, or who want to start out now, and find a college course and kind of follow in your footsteps?
I think there's probably there's a lot more access to information now than there ever has been in terms of like sport. Like say data of soccer, I can go download one file which will have every shot from every top league in one go, and then I can start to play around with that data set and actually put something online. And there's a massive amount of bloggers and tweeters and Instagrammers and stuff that have started off by just putting stuff online that have now got jobs out of that. There's an amazing story of I think he's 16 or 17-year-old kid who started. He's in India and he just started playing with this data set from Scottish football, but now he's part of their recruitment team. He's never left India. He's never been in Scotland. But because the stuff he was coming up with was so good, they were like they took him on, and
that's insane.
It's a great story because it's that like I really do think like it's separate, but Twitter and Instagram are so dangerous, and Facebook, it just breaks me that people can go on and start shouting off abuse at people. That's a separate thing. But one of the positives that I do believe that it is that it opens up that world of connecting maybe people who previously would never have been able to do that. And all of a sudden they've an insight into, I can send a message to somebody online and say, how did you do that? Or
that's fascinating. I say that all the time to young people. Ask me about, how do I get into do what you do? Just start doing it. Just start writing your local paper, podcast, do something. Everybody can broadcast now. They couldn't when I was starting out, but everybody can broadcast in some sense. Just start doing it. And you're saying the same thing, like find some data, analyze it, and see if you have, a passion for it.
And see if you like it. Because if you just go, oh my God, this is torture, then
that is actually one of my last questions. Do you need to love sport? Do you need to love the environment to work in it? Because you do have to sacrifice a good bit to be working when other people are watching.
I think you do. It's like anything though, isn't it? Like if you don't, if it gets you up in the morning and you do it for free, well then that's a starting point. If you can make some cash out of it, then that's even better. And if you can make some good cash out of it, that's the ideal. So wherever you see it on that continuum, then it's probably the starting point for me is actually having some kind of a purpose to it, and do you love it, or do you get a buzz from it? And if I'm not enjoying it or having fun or That's a massive one for me. If I'm not having crack doing something, then I just pull the plug on it and I'll move on. And yeah, I think like you're saying, anyone can do, like, I mean, you've broadcasted your patio being built. So I'm sure there's a market for people who are into patios.
I'm going to start hiring out my husband for little jobs. I think I can make money out of that, and I can really enjoy that.
Yes. Like passive income, and then the 4-hour work, Tim Ferriss, 4-hour work week, no problem. You could just get him to
get him out of the house for 4 hours every day as well.
Yeah. But no, seriously, there's loads of entry points now. Like science, I think Science Foundation Ireland have some really good stuff at bridging that or bringing that STEM subjects to life a little bit more. I think for me, like I have Twitter and Instagram and stuff. I'm not very good on either, but I don't use them a whole lot. But if anybody ever wanted to get, to reach out, especially in like kids, the 16, 17, 18-year-olds that are coming to a point where they want to make a career choice, be really happy to help and to advise. Like I look every year, say the BT Young Scientist competition. I go through that every single year looking for ideas or inspiration or something that I take out of going, how did he do that? Or how did she come up with this? Or
that's amazing. That's amazing. Like you're heading up a department at one of the biggest organizations in the country, and you're still looking to where you can learn more. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, or I'm just a massive imposter and
no, like and also bluffer. but you see, this is like you're also like you're humble enough to say, okay, a 17-year-old might actually know more than me about this system. Yeah, which I think is brilliant.
That's it.
Okay, final question, and it might put you on the spot, but can you think of your favorite day working in sport? And you've had a few.
The Six Nations win in Twickenham in that was just one of those ones where I remember leaving the changing room and I was nearly in tears because I was like, I wouldn't never really have that kind of emotional moments or whatever, but just I felt like the moment we left that stadium that day, obviously it becomes something different when you leave the stadium, but you have that unbelievable in the changing room, just the people who you've been with. You look at the guys, the players, they've made such sacrifices to be there. They've done some amazing things. The day itself was the coldest day I've ever remember. All of our equipment was frozen, so nothing was working. All came to life just at kickoff. There was this massive gust of wind came in the middle of the game and took so Simon Easterby has all his his lineouts all printed off like this, completely. He's so organized. Gust of wind comes in and there's just papers just everywhere, right? But it's all our tactics. So it's gone down to the East Stand in Twickenham, all the English supporters, and I'm in the coach's box, and I'm like, sorry, can we, excuse me. So so that was just, there was so much funny stuff happening at the same time.
Oh my God, that sounds like a nightmare. And
but it's just, you just have
but also just a roller coaster. Exactly. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. And you're stuck right in the middle of it as well, and I think that's the message to get across, is that we're not all going to be Olympic sprinters, we're not all going to play for Ireland, but we can try and find some niche where we can throw ourselves into that team environment and be there on those big days.
Absolutely. And those niches I think are growing. So even some areas where you potentially think that there's not a Man City is a perfect example. If anybody wanted to look at their staff list now, the City Football Group, who have Man City, who have Yokohama, they have team in Uruguay as well, and others. If you look at their staff list, they've got a visualization specialist, so somebody who just does visualizations, data visualizations. So that's art, that's somebody who can make things look beautiful but doesn't necessarily have to care about rugby. Graphic designers, video coordinator, performance analyst, data scientist, data engineer, the whole way through. So there's a gap there. If you like sport, there's something, hopefully it can help somebody.
Brilliant. That'll be my tagline. Vinny Hammond, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate you saying that people can reach out if they need to on Twitter and Instagram. So look, thank you so much for kicking off this series, episode 1, and we will chat again soon.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Evanne. Thanks for having me.
Take care.